You've been told that if you work hard enough, if you stay loyal enough, if you just grind long enough, the money will come. You've been told that rich people are either lucky or corrupt, and that the good guys always finish somewhere respectable, comfortable, safe. You've been told that wealth is a reward, and you've spent years, maybe decades, waiting for that reward, and it hasn't come. And here you are. Maybe you're watching this at midnight because you ran the numbers again, and they still don't add up. Maybe you got passed over for a promotion by someone who you know works half as hard as you. Maybe you looked at your bank account this morning and felt that cold, quiet shame you don't talk about with anyone, not your partner, not your friends, not even yourself, in the daylight. I want to tell you something that no productivity guru, no 6 figures in 6 months influencer, and no motivational poster has ever had the guts to say to you. You are not losing because you are lazy. You are losing because you are playing the wrong games. And the people who are winning, they figured out a long time ago that there are really only 3 games that matter when it comes to money. 3 battlefields. And if you're not consciously playing all 3 of them, with strategy, with ice in your veins, with the ruthless clarity of a man who has studied power the way a surgeon studies anatomy, then you are not in the game at all. You are the resource in someone else's game. Let's change that. In 1513, a man sat in a small farmhouse outside Florence, broken, humiliated, freshly released from torture at the hands of the Medici family. He had lost his political career, his reputation, his influence. He had nothing. And in that darkness, Niccolò Machiavelli picked up a quill and wrote a book, so dangerous, so nakedly honest about how power actually works, that it has been banned by popes, burned by kings, and secretly read by every ruler worth fearing for the last 500 years, The Prince. Machiavelli didn't write a self-help book. He didn't write a philosophy of kindness. He looked at the world as it actually was, brutal, transactional, ungrateful, and deeply strategic. And he said, here are the rules of the real game. Most people cannot handle the real game. Most people need the comfortable story, that virtue is rewarded, that honesty always wins, that good things come to those who wait. Machiavelli had a different message. He said, fortune is a river, and when it rages, it destroys everything in its path. But a wise man builds levees before the flood comes. He prepares, he positions, he acts, not from hope, but from understanding. Today, we are going to apply that thinking to money. Not theory, not inspiration, strategy. 3 games, and inside those 3 games, 10 brutal, uncomfortable, life-changing strategies that the wealthy have used for centuries, and that no one in your orbit has ever had the nerve to hand you directly. Pay attention. This is a masterclass. Game 1, the perception game. Strategy 1, control what people believe about you before reality has a chance to speak. Machiavelli wrote something that will disturb you if you sit with it long enough. He said, everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. Read that again, slowly. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. This isn't cynicism, this is architecture. The wealthy don't just build wealth, they build the image of wealth in a very specific, intentional way, because they understand something that your school teachers never taught you. In a world of incomplete information, perception becomes reality, and reality follows perception, not the other way around. The Rothschild family understood this viscerally. In the early 19th century, Nathan Mayer Rothschild received news of Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo before anyone else in London through his private courier network. He walked onto the floor of the London Stock Exchange, sat at his usual pillar, and did something unexpected. He started selling. Everyone watching him thought, Rothschild is selling. Wellington must have lost. Napoleon won, and they panic sold everything. The market collapsed. Then, quietly, through agents, Rothschild bought it all back at rock-bottom prices. By the time the real news arrived, that Wellington had won, that Britain was victorious, Rothschild had made a fortune that reshaped European banking for a generation. He didn't just have information, he weaponized perception. He made his appearance tell a story that the market believed before the truth arrived. Now, I am not telling you to be deceptive. I'm telling you to be intentional. There is a difference. When you show up to a negotiation, when you walk into a job interview, when you pitch a client, when you meet a potential partner, what story are you telling before you open your mouth? What does your email signature say? What does your handshake communicate? What does the quality of your questions reveal about the depth of your thinking? Most people leave perception entirely to chance. They show up and hope the truth speaks for itself. The Machiavellian player manages perception the way a chess grandmaster manages the board, proactively, many moves ahead, with the understanding that how you are perceived changes the options available to you. Strategy 2. Never reveal your full hand. Ever. Here is a mistake that keeps smart, talented people poor for their entire lives. They talk too much. They tell their boss about the other job offer before they actually have leverage. They share their business idea with friends who dilute it with doubt before it ever launches. They disclose their financial situation in negotiations where that vulnerability gets used against them. They post their wins on social media and attract resentment instead of alliance. Machiavelli was crystal clear on this. He wrote that a prince must be a fox, clever, concealed, circuitous, and he must know when to hide the fact that he is also a lion. Warren Buffett sits on the board of Berkshire Hathaway and says almost nothing about what he's worth. Carnegie, the SEC filings are required. By then, he's already positioned. His silence is his edge. His patience is his weapon. Information asymmetry is how wealth is built. The person who knows more than the other person in any transaction almost always wins. The moment you equalize information unnecessarily, you surrender your advantage. So ask yourself, right now, sitting where you are, where are you oversharing? Where are you giving away leverage because you're trying to seem relatable or humble or transparent? Where is your honesty costing you money? There is a version of discretion that is not dishonesty. It is strategic silence. It is choosing what to share, when to share it, and with whom, as a function of your goals, not your emotions. Master this. It will be worth more to you than any degree you have ever earned. Strategy 3. Become the person everyone wants to impress. I want you to stop for a second. Think of one word, just one word, that describes how the most important people in your professional life currently perceive you. Not how you see yourself, not how you wish they saw you, how they actually see you, right now, today. Hold that word. Does it give you power, or does it cost you power? That word is your current market position, and in the game of wealth, position determines everything. John D. Rockefeller, the first American billionaire, was described by those who dealt with him as unnervingly calm. He never seemed impressed. He never seemed desperate. He listened more than he spoke. He made people feel that they needed to earn his approval. That energy, that aura of calm, selective engagement, made people want to be in his circle, made them come to him, made them offer terms favorable to him, because the alternative was not having access to him at all. This is what Machiavelli meant when he described the ideal prince as someone whose company they people seek, whose favor they compete for, whose judgment they defer to. In the modern economy, if you are always the most eager person in the room, if you are always available, always responsive, always accommodating, you are training the people around you to undervalue you. Availability without exclusivity destroys perceived worth. Become the person people want to impress. Not through arrogance, through standard, through consistency, depth, and deliberate scarcity of approval. The game 2, the leverage. Game strategy 4, stop trading time. Start stacking leverage. This is the one that separates the people who have money from the people who will have money. Machiavelli described 2 fundamental types of power in The Prince. Power that lives in your own virtue, your skill, your intelligence, your capability, and power that comes from borrowed fortune, from dependency on others, from circumstances you don't control. He said, "Only the first kind survives adversity." In financial terms, this is the difference between earned income and leveraged income. Most people spend their entire lives earning. They wake up, they trade their hours, they collect their salary, and they genuinely, sincerely believe that if they just earn enough, they will one day cross the line into security. But there is no line, because earned income has a ceiling called time. You only have 24 hours, and no employer, no client, no market on earth will pay you enough per hour to close the gap between where you are and where you want to be, not through hours alone, not in one lifetime. Leverage breaks the time barrier. Leverage is owning a system that earns while you sleep, a business, an investment, intellectual property, equity, ownership of anything that compounds, that works harder the longer it exists, without requiring proportionally more of your existence. Rockefeller understood this at a molecular level. By the time Standard Oil was at its peak, Rockefeller wasn't refining oil, he wasn't loading barrels, he was owning pipelines. He was owning railroads. He was owning the infrastructure through which other people's labor flowed and taking a percentage of every dollar that moved through his system. That is leverage. The question is not, how can I work harder? The question is, what can I own that works harder than me? Strategy 5. Use other people's belief, capital, and network as fuel. Here is a truth that will bother people who were raised to be self-reliant. The wealthy do not build alone. They build on top of other people's belief, other people's capital, other people's connections. Not by exploiting, by aligning, by making their vision compelling enough that others choose to invest, to introduce, to endorse. This is not manipulation. This is architecture. Machiavelli wrote that the wise prince always makes his people feel as though his success is inseparable from their success. He creates alignment of interests. He makes the people around him feel that helping him is helping themselves. Every successful startup pitch is this. Every fundraise, every alliance. The person who raises $10 million to build a company isn't just selling shares. They are convincing people that their future is tied to this vision. They are making believers into stakeholders, and stakeholders do not abandon their investment. Where in your financial life could you stop trying to do everything alone and instead create alignment? What could you build that makes other people want to see you win? Strategy 6. The art of the asymmetric bet. Think of one situation in your life right now where you are taking a large risk for a small possible reward, where you are working hard, investing time, sacrificing comfort, and the upside, even in the best case, barely moves the needle. Most people's lives are full of these. A career with a 3% raise ceiling, a savings account earning fractional interest, a side project that could at best replace a small slice of income. Now imagine flipping that. Imagine finding situations where the downside is small and defined, but the upside is enormous and open-ended. This is what Nassim Taleb calls the barbell strategy. This is what Buffett calls margin of safety. This is what Machiavelli called knowing the difference between bold action and reckless action, and understanding that bold action is calculated, not impulsive. The wealthy, generationally, take bets that look crazy from the outside, but are deeply asymmetric on the inside. They risk what they can afford to lose entirely, a small, defined amount, in exchange for exposure to outcomes that could multiply their position by 10, 20, 100 times. They are not gambling, they are engineering probabilities. Start asking about every investment of your time, money, and energy. What is the maximum I can lose? What is the maximum I can gain? And what is the realistic probability of each? If the math doesn't favor you, don't play. Strategy 7. Control the choke points. Machiavelli was obsessed with geography. He studied why certain cities could be held and others couldn't, why certain territories were worth defending and others were traps. And the answer was almost always about choke points, the narrow passages through which everything must flow. In economics, choke points are the places where value is forced to concentrate. Distribution channels, payment processors, attention platforms, professional certifications, licensing structures. The people who own the choke points don't have to be the best at making anything. They just have to be positioned where everything passes through. The early railroad barons understood this. Rockefeller understood this. Jeff Bezos built an entire empire on the understanding that if he could own the infrastructure, layer of commerce, the logistics, the cloud, the marketplace, then every other business in the world would have to pay him a toll. The question for your life is, where are the choke points in your industry? Where does value have to flow? And how do you get positioned there? It doesn't have to be grand, a specialist skill that no one else in your city has, a relationship with the one distributor that serves your market, a platform audience in a specific niche, a license that takes years to obtain. Choke points create leverage, and leverage creates wealth. Game 3, the time game. Strategy 8, understand fortune, then build levees. Machiavelli wrote one of the most devastating passages in the history of philosophy when he addressed the question of fate versus free will. He said that fortune governs half of our actions, but the other half she leaves to us. She is like a river in flood, and when the good weather comes, men can take precautions, building channels, building barriers, so that when the flood returns, it either runs harmlessly or its force is channeled where we need it. In financial terms, this means one thing above everything else. You must prepare, in prosperity, for the adversity that is coming, every single time. The people who were financially destroyed in 2008, in 2020, in every crisis, were not all unlucky. Many of them simply had no levies. They were fully exposed, fully leveraged, fully dependent on conditions staying exactly as they were. The wealthy, the generationally wealthy, build redundancy, multiple income streams, emergency capital, diversified assets, legal structures, insurance. Not because they are pessimists, because they understand that fortune will flood again. She always does. Rockefeller lived through multiple economic panics and emerged stronger after each one, not because he was luckier than his competitors, but because he had built his business to survive them. He stockpiled cash while others borrowed. He tightened operations when others expanded recklessly. And when the panic came and credit froze and desperate sellers flooded the market, he had the one thing everyone else lacked: dry powder. Preparation that looks like paranoia in good times looks like genius in bad times. What are your levies? Strategy 9. Play a longer game than everyone around you. Here is the most underrated wealth strategy in the history of money. Be willing to wait longer than your competition. Not passive waiting, not lazy, hope-based waiting. Strategic patience, the willingness to endure short-term discomfort, short-term ridicule, short-term invisibility, in service of a position that compounds over years and decades into something unreachable. Warren Buffett made 97% of his net worth after the age of 65. 97%. If he had stopped at 65, you would never have heard his name. The compounding hadn't finished yet. Machiavelli would have understood this perfectly. He wrote that many men attack a problem at the point of passion, in the moment of emotion, in the heat of urgency, and they lose, because their opponents, who are colder, who are more patient, who are more strategic, simply wait for them to exhaust themselves. The person who can wait, in a negotiation, in a market, in a career, holds enormous power over the person who cannot. Your impatience is costing you money. Not once, not occasionally. Every single day, your inability to delay gratification is extracting a toll from your future self. The compound interest of money is well understood. The compound interest of positioning, of systematically placing yourself, over years, into increasingly powerful situations, is what the wealthy never talk about, but always practice. Play longer, go slower, build deeper. Strategy 10. Be ruthlessly, uncomfortably honest about your real constraints. This is the hardest one, and I want you to be honest with yourself for a moment. Think of the single biggest lie you tell yourself about your financial situation. Not the lie you tell other people, the one you tell yourself. Maybe it's, I'll start investing when I earn more. Maybe it's, I'm not a money person. Maybe it's, the system is rigged, so what's the point? Maybe it's, I just need one more year before I make real changes. Machiavelli despised what he called false prudence, the habit of avoiding hard decisions by convincing yourself that delay is wisdom. He wrote that men deceive themselves into thinking that they can escape present difficulties by choosing a middle way, and that this middle way almost always results in ruin because it avoids commitment, avoids decisiveness, and lets the problem grow while the person congratulates themselves on not overreacting. The uncomfortable truth is that most financial failure is not a lack of income, it's a lack of honesty about spending, about priorities, about the real cost of current habits in future years, about the gap between the plan you say you have and the behavior you actually execute. The wealthy are brutal about this, not in a punishing way, in a clarifying way. They run the real numbers. They face the real timeline. They sit with the discomfort of knowing where they actually are, without the sedative of optimism or the paralysis of despair. And then they move, not from emotion, from strategy. Closing, 1902 Tour 2030. So here is where we land. 3 games, 10 strategies. The perception game, where you engineer how the world sees you before the world makes up its own mind. The leverage game, where you stop selling your hours and start building systems, asymmetric bets, and strategic choke points. The time game, where you build levees against fortune's floods. Play a longer timeline than everyone around you, and face your real constraints with the cold clarity of someone who has decided to win. Machiavelli wrote The Prince from the depths of his own failure. He had lost everything. He was writing to understand how power really worked. Not how we wish it worked. Not how our parents told us it worked, but how it actually, mechanically, historically works when you strip away the stories we tell ourselves. And the answer, distilled across 500 years and applied to the world of money, is this. Wealth is not a reward for virtue. Wealth is a consequence of strategy. The good news, the genuinely exciting, democratizing, keep you up at night good news, is that strategy is learnable. It is not inherited. It is not granted by birth or luck or connection. It is built through the uncomfortable, repetitive, deeply unglamorous work of seeing the world clearly and acting on what you see. You started watching this video because something in you knew that the story you'd been given wasn't complete. You were right. You are not behind because you weren't trying hard enough. You were behind because no one handed you the map. You have it now. What you do next is entirely up to you. Subscribe, call to action. If this hit differently than what you usually watch, if you found yourself pausing, rewinding, thinking about something in your own life, then you already know why you should subscribe.